Thank you so much for coming to the caregiving and gender session. Well, I'm Matías, as you said earlier. Yeah, we had many interesting presentations for this session. And today also we have the visit from Martin here in person, so which is quite great. Yeah, so just general comments and instructions about this session. It's like a bit similar to the sample conference in terms of the format. The presentations should last around 15 minutes. I don't have this kind of finance, but I guess that I'm not. This is not gonna work with people online, so I'm gonna show there at the camera. And yeah, so just be aware about your time, which is 50 minutes again. And yeah, thanks so much for coming. And yeah, so the first presentation is from Benjamín Bruna, which is titled "The Linking Social Capital of Chilean Caregivers of Dependent Older Adults, an Exploration Using Social Network Analysis." So yeah, so let's start.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much for the introduction. I'm going to, everything good? Everyone see the my screen?
Yes.
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, perfect. So, an exploration of the linking social capital of Chilean caregivers of dependent older adults. Well, I am Benjamin. Actually, I am an occupational therapist, currently doing the master degree in sociology. So I work as a therapist with older adults here in Chile for many years, and from that experience, I wanted to study the social networks and specifically the social capital of the caregivers of the place where I work. So why linking social capital? Why social network analysis? And why caregivers? Well, to begin with, many countries like Chile and many others are experiencing a population that is getting older. The latest studies from the National Institute of Statistics in Chile projects that in the future we will have a great percentage of the population older than 60 years old. And this is a challenge for many countries because in some point, all of these older adults will need eventually some type of help to perform basic daily activities. And this challenge requires new policies that can help not only the older people but also the caregivers, because being a caregiver, it's very difficult. I have some data here that Villalobos, it's a Chilean sociologist, made a study about the caregivers in Chile using the socioeconomic characterization survey. And since one caregivers have to be there for the older person of the person she's taking care of, usually she cannot do other things like work or leisure activities, and this is very, very uh, detrimental for the mental health and physical health. There are many studies that highlight that caregivers earn less. However, they have more expenses. They have to meet more needs with fewer resources because they cannot work, especially when the person that they're taking care of has a high level of dependency, that they are unable to do many basic activities. We call them basic activities of daily living, such as change our clothes, um, eat, for example. So this is very challenging for the caregivers and for the older adults too. And this is projected to be much more in the future. So the Chilean government is now sending a new law to make a new system for caregivers. Currently, we have Chile Cuida, Chile Cares, that is currently a small program that, in my experience, is unable to really help the caregivers. And considering that, for cultural reasons, most caregivers are female. Actually, we call it feminization of older people, because more older people, more females get to be older, and culturally, society demands that they are females that take care of their family. And this has been widely studied. And actually, my own data shows that is 90% of the people in my study were female. And when we also consider that females are also in disadvantage in many areas, and especially older, since they some generations ago they were more didn't have access to higher education. They have less opportunities. It becomes more of a problem. So we have an increasing population that is getting older. We have these older people that in some point will need and is needing some form of care. And we have these caregivers, informal caregivers, informal meaning that they don't have any payment. Formal means that the family is paying someone to take care of an older adult, a member of the family. But I'm studying primarily informal caregivers. They earn less, have lower um, health, physical health, and mental health. It's very stressful, can't work, and can't do leisure activities. So they're in this problem. And the Chilean government is trying to um, is now sending a new law to make a new system to 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 make a new system of, for social welfare for them specifically. And well, social capital has been studied as a very important an important element in helping reducing the negative effects of caregiving. And there are many types of social capital: bonding, bridging, and linking. Being bonding, the social capital between people that are similar, for example, family or friends. Bridging, between people that is different, for example, in one neighborhood and other neighborhood. And the social capital I studied is linking social capital, which is the social capital, the relationships between people in different, in asymmetrical levels of power. For example, a caregiver and a social worker in working in the municipality. That's the social capital I studied. And why? Because in the context of this new law, studies show that when policymakers and the people that need new laws, they have a good relationship, a good linking social capital. The new law, which is currently being discussed in the Chilean Congress, is more likely to tackle these needs, the real needs of caregivers. And moreover, the linking social capital is very important between people who need resources and the workers who have resources at their disposal. For example, the linking social capital between a student and the social worker that can approve social welfare or scholarships. So when we have a trust between these two agents, it's proven that the person who needs resources, for example, in this example, the student, have more possibilities to access these resources. That's why, for me, linking social capital was really important between caregivers and the people that have access to resources that they need. So I use we have many definitions of social capital, and um, some of them are more, for me, they are more suitable for a social network analysis, and others not so much. I try to use the Burt theory of structural holes, since he has a very he used a lot of network concepts to build his social capital theory. In this theory, what is important in social capital is that we don't have too many redundant connections. For example, one agent or node in a network has only one connection. Maybe he has a very strong connection with someone important, for example, a family member. But for this theory, this is not very good because it's redundant. The information is always the same and have less possibility of having new information, new resources. And we have two measures, two network measures for this, effective size and constraint index. Effective size, effective size is, I will show you with my network. In this case, this is my network. You can see that we have, and the size of the node is proportional to the out degree. We have, for example, P9, that is a caregiver. She has many connections, and their connections are mostly with healthcare workers and municipality workers. The municipality has many resources, for example, social welfare and stipends for caregivers. So in this node, you can see that there are many connections, but they are not connecting between each other. And this is important for the structural holes theory, because for a caregiver, if she has one good connection with a social worker, the social worker can give her different resources than having a good relationship with a healthcare worker, because a social worker can give, for example, stipends, and the health worker can give a different type of resource, different type of help. As we can see in this table, in my research, mostly was the half of the connections between caregivers was with healthcare workers, people from the healthcare system, and then municipality authorities. For example, municipality workers or other workers from other municipalities. And this implies that they are making connections based on their needs, especially because they care for someone that has bad health or have a very serious health situation. They mostly need to connect with healthcare workers. And for us, this is our out degree, our that is the most important, and the nodes, the constraint index, and the Burt effective size. Mostly the caregivers who had most connection were part of some kind of leadership, for example, neighborhood leadership or leadership in their communities. that's why they had connections, and they leveraged these connections to get resources for themselves, the people that they care, and their friends or family. Well, I already talked about this. 90% were female, and mostly were informal caregivers. The care recipient were also predominantly female. Most of them had a long-term relationship with their alters or with their connections, averaging in average 20 years old. I mean, of connection. The social network, the structure was low density, limited interconnection between alters, very isolated, and some of them, well, most of them had an average between 1 and 2 out degree number. And the most important connection was the healthcare and the municipal authorities. And according to the theory of structural hosts, only 3 caregivers had advantage position in the network because they can leverage many connections between their alters to have resources from different sources. And finally, I have not so much time, 1 minute. And well, in the final discussion, we have limited high-level connections. For example, senators, deputies, the mayor of the councilors of the municipality in the Chilean system are very, very, very few. Only they're up connected with local authorities, more close to their needs. There is opportunity for expansion because there are many caregivers that can build social capital, building bridges, connections between the people that are connected but are not connected to each other. I mean, non-redundant connections. But we have potential ethical concerns because in linking social capital, some caregivers may use their connection to bypass rules or other type of requirements to get help. And this was an ethical concern that we can see nepotism and some kind of dark side to linking social capital. Can be good, but also can allow bad use of this trusted connection between people in power, in situation of power. And well, future research directions, we can explore the negative outcomes of linking social capital, study strategies for caregivers to leverage and build bridges between the different sources of resource and help among different representatives of the position of the institution of power or state institutions that are built for them. And well, my references, and thank you very much. I hope I didn't pass the time.
Thank you so much, Benjamín. So we have 5 minutes of questions. So if anyone here in presence or virtually can raise a question to Benjamín, this is the time. Yep.
Thank you, Benjamín. Can you hear me, right?
Yes.
Yes, okay, good. So I think there is a few points that I will just want to point it out. First of all, you make a very strong argument saying that, you know, the theory that you are picking, which is this interpretation of social capital, is more sociological for you, but I missed the point why you think the other ones are not relevant. So, you know, it's just a matter of, you were saying, yeah, Bert is important, we need it to go here. And I think it would be nice to hear why exactly the other ones are not. And I also missed the point of why the setting of your data. It was a bit confusing to me. So maybe it's more like a clarification note as well. Because it seems to me that you are picking ego networks And if you're picking ego networks, I think it's very hard to me to see why you're applying this type of measure in ego network, or it could be reasonable, but it was hard to me to understand the rationality behind. And that leads me to the third point, which is, I think your notes were also institutions, and I think, well, it was institution and something else. And I thought, well, why using them as like a similar node and not using it as a two-mode node? You know, it's like something which is a different network structure. And that might be more meaningful because, of course, if you use these bird measures, I think it might be biased by the municipality. Let's say the municipality is helping everyone, so of course it should have like a position there. So yeah, okay, that was.
Thank you very much. Well, the other type of social capital are important, of course. In the context of this new policy, previous research show that when we have linking social capital, between people in positions of power and policymakers, we can build more resilient or more accurate laws. And for example, if a caregiver have social capital, that's been studied. For example, in their families, friends, they tend to lose some of that relationship because they cannot just sometimes they cannot go out. They have to take care of the people. But having a connection or a trusted connection with someone that has position of power is different in this context of discussion of a new policy. We also have this public discussion about the crisis of care, and it was for me it was interesting to study from this perspective, from this area, the linking social capital specifically, and also when I did the literature research, there was some calls to study more linking social capital, and because it's not deeply studied. And the other ones are really important, yes. But linking social capital in this context of debate, for me was because I work with the same people I studied, and what happens is that they in throughout the years, because the older adults have long-term health problems, so they have many years with the same nurse, for example, and they develop something throughout those years. So I wanted to study that because it's kind of more not so there is not too much light on that. And well, the second question, at the beginning, I thought that in the ego network, but when I did my questionnaire, the data collection tool, and I did some interviews to collect data, there are some relationships between the people that they are connected to. Not too much, but they have. For example, in P9, that it's here. This one. We have that. Though these ones are connected to each other, and I decided, because if I do ego network analysis, it's going to be only the alters their connections. And since we have an important data that is among them, so I decided to integrate that and use the theory of structural holes, because mostly because if you have two friends, you have resources that coming from both, but it's going to be different if you are a friend of a senator or the mayor, and the other friend is a social worker or a nurse or a doctor. You can get different types of resources, of help, of welfare or advice, or other type of exchange. I did ask for what type of exchange, and mostly the exchange is mostly emotional, attention, advice, listening, and not so much concrete help. There is important part of the exchanges that happen, and between the nodes, but it's mostly attention, um, and resources of opportunities, for example. And the third question, may you repeat?
I was just asking whether the nodes, you are treating the nodes at the same level.
Give me 1 second. Okay. The nodes, why I am using the nodes at the same level?
Yeah.
I mean, do you mean since they have a different type of, they are in asymmetrical relationship, why it's like they're all the same?
Yeah, so basically you're using, for example, institution inside there, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think, yeah, it might change your interpretation if you take them out.
For example, but what happened is that, for example, one caregiver constantly has to go to the municipality and talk to a social worker, always the same worker, social worker, for renovate some welfare benefit, and it is always the same worker. So I treat them like they are a person normally, right? Because they throughout the years they become acquaintances, even friends, and some of them are family. That's why one of the concerns at the end was a little bit of corruption, because some of the workers that, for example, are belong in an institution of power, sometimes are family members, and when there is a family member that controls who gets one resource or one benefit or one thing, it becomes problematic, and that's why they are the same level. So if the caregiver is friend of two nurses from the same hospital, they are treated like two different, regardless they belong to the same institution. I'm not sure if I am answering your question.
It's all right. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, we are running out of time, so I guess that we can just raise one question. I think Martin want to ask you something, we can just.
Yeah, quite simple question, I think. So where did you get the altar ties from? Normally, you'd ask ego about the alter-alter ties, but I wonder whether ego in this situation would know whether those ties exist.
For the you mean for the collection, data collection?
Yeah.
I made a list of all the people I needed. Because I don't need it, the friend, casual friend, or anything like that. I just wanted to know if you are you know a nurse or someone that works in a hospital. Yes. Do you trust that person, and etc. etc. So I asked them directly for that person if they know someone belonging to that institution, and and later I try to characterize some data. But if they know one person from that institution, I characterize what type of worker or what type of person, and I made a line. I made the connection. I draw the edge between them, and they had the opportunity, for example, to say, yes, I know 4 people in for example, in the police department. I know 4 people, and so the caregiver had 4 edges, right? One for each person they know in that institution. And then I try to further characterize what type of relationship there is, trusted relationship, and so on.
Yeah, that wasn't my question. My question was the connections between the people that you've listed. The caregiver lists some individuals, and then you've joined some of those individuals up.
Yes.
Where do those connections come from? Because they are fundamental in Bert's theory.
Yes, exactly. I further ask if they know each other, and what happened in most cases is that their family. What happened is that the caregiver have, for example, a granddaughter. She's a nurse, and she works with another granddaughter, and their mom also worked there. So it happened very few times that there are actually some kind of family inside the institution, and they all relate to each other. They are all family, and I asked them what type of relationship they were between the alters, between the other nodes, and most of the time happened that it didn't happen too much time, because normally they have only one in one institution. But in the cases that what you see connections between those nodes is because they had some family there. And when I ask them years of connection, trust is always the highest trust, the highest number of connection. I ask them, for example, okay, these two persons know each other for how long? And she'd tell me she has 25 years old, and I know her 25 years old. I know her, and my other granddaughter or my daughter that also works there, they know her 25 years old, so they know for the whole life, and they have this family. Some may be due to the experience of having an older person who has serious health issues, that the daughters or granddaughters or son or grandson have an interest in studying healthcare or social welfare. But that happened to me was kind of unexpected. But in the full data, I have the relationships between them and their families in the institution, and they all know each other. In the other cases, they don't know each other. They just work with the person I care, so I know them, and throughout the years, I trust them. I trust they're a good nurse, they're a good doctor.
Thank you.
So, thank you, Benjamin, for your presentation. It was pretty insightful. So, next presentation is from Francisca. Yeah. So, Francisca is gonna present us her research on social capital in personal networks literature, systematic review. So, okay, I have 15 minutes. I use these signals for you.
Thank you so much, Matías.
Thank you.
So maybe let's try this. This is a new one and it doesn't work. Okay. No way. Yes, 1 second. I wanted to try this actually. That was a good image. Okay, so let me move this a bit closer. So thank you very much for being here, especially because it's the first session, so I know it's difficult sometimes. So today I'm going to present a systematic review that I did with this whole team, and we are all working together in a project that actually we got funding until 2027. And this is like the first paper that we are already actually is in review in the Revista Redes. So there. Yeah. Okay. So about the research project, we are trying to understand what are the main challenges of women caregivers, especially the generation actually that is called the sandwich generation, which is a little bit weird nomination. I hate that, but it's actually the women who are taking care of their parents, but at the same time of their kids, especially little kids. So that's why they are in the middle of the sandwich. So this generation doesn't have so many studies about their impact in their well-being and in their health broadly. So that's what is our focus on. And the whole study has two parts. So first we're going to be doing a 3 waves survey. We already have done the first one, which is great. And we already are exploring those data, but actually the second one is going to be starting, I think, next week. So we're in the middle of the chaos. And then afterwards, we are going to keep a little sample to actually make some interviews in there. What is interesting? Well, I know this is an English speaker track, so here you have it, the English version. It was a surprise, but we use Instagram, we use different social media to actually share the call for getting to reach these people. And actually it was very difficult because women caregivers, they usually don't use so much social media. They're a very invisible part of society, so it was very difficult to reach them and also to ask them to answer a survey that was super long as a networks kind of survey. And you're going to see why, because actually we asked about the personal network first. We asked them, oh, you're gonna see this well. Okay, we asked a lot of social demographics aspects of the person, of ego. We asked for the alter ties. We asked them for a position generator. Then we have a resource generator. And we also have some banding and bridging questions. So the idea actually, it was trying to compare, hopefully this is something that I need to do during the summer, but the idea is to actually compare the different methodologies and the different scales that have been used in the literature and to find out maybe what works best or not, or what happens when I do that comparison. But that's something that I'm looking forward to work on during the summer. So we have a lot of questions about health issues, mental and also physical ones. But in this part, what I want to show you is about the literature review, because that helped us to actually create the whole survey. So the first thing is, well, you already know all this, but I'm going to be super quick, okay? So what I want to emphasize is that actually when we have a network like this one, you can actually look into different, you can focus on different parts of the networks, depending on the measure that you're using. So for example, in this one, if you're using social capital as a way of, if you understand social capital as a way to access to resources, and maybe you're going to be looking into this part of the network. Maybe you are going to be interested in those nodes. Then, if you have a cohesion kind of approach, you're going to be looking into the density, in the strong relationships, and maybe in the same network, you're going to be looking in there. Okay, maybe here there are more connections, something is happening there, maybe there's a group in there. But then this one, for example, is like very, very dense and tiny group. But also maybe that one, because it's like you don't have any connections, what is happening there. But if you see the brokerage, from the brokerage approach, you can actually emphasize different nodes. So for example, you're going to have a focus on those ones. So the methodology, we use the Prisma approach. I don't know if you know it, but it's a classical one for systematic review. So we're using the classic things, and we study the networks community. And as you know, these are the most favorite journals. Well, we have an editor of 2 of them right now. But the thing is that we use these ones because obviously it's not recognized them, and the whole sample is okay. So you have the number of articles that we found first. There are the number of articles that we exclude, and then at the end we managed to find 79 articles that we use in the whole analysis. So that's something very relevant because obviously that's the limit of our analysis. We are not going out of there, which is something that actually we are trying now. So the data collection was a little bit different between journals because they have different systems. So that I'm going to skip that part, but just to let you know, there was some difference on how to do it, but we keep the same words to make the whole search. And what we were looking into, all these variables, the ones that I highlighted are the ones that maybe we're going to talk about a little bit more right now. But we did a meta-analysis too about the authors of those articles. We use, about the validity, we use the Cochrane, how did I say it? Cochrane method, I think. Which is something more used more often actually in the medicine and health related topics, but it was really good. So we use these kind of methods. We can talk about them later if you want, but I want to skip to the results. So the vast majority of the papers actually came from these countries, which is something interesting. Okay, so we have actually makes sense. If you know the community, it makes a lot of sense that a lot of people from the United States is using this concept. And secondly, in the Netherlands, because obviously you have a lot of people working in social capital from there, and you can already think about some people. Then another aspect, the majority are men, but actually I will not say there is a difference or not, because obviously this is not causal effect. But maybe there is something interesting in the collaborations that we need to look into later on. Then about the keywords, so we have a lot of studies looking into inequalities through the measure of social capital. That's the vast majority to say. And what I want to show you is, this was super funny because it's like, it appears that is some kind of agreement that actually there are some references that if you keep them in your work is going to be fine, because it's like, okay, I already did those references. Those are the classical ones. And the ones that I found out that they were in all the articles analyzed, those were those 4. So obviously Nan Lin was the one who was the most cited, of course. I think no article actually didn't cite him, and actually probably they cite him like at least 3 or 4 times. So it was basically, that's the theoretical framework that probably everyone used. And something interesting about this, actually, about the notion of social capital that people are using, is that actually after 2010, a lot of people is using position generator as the main method, and maybe the only one. They didn't try any other methods. But actually before the 2010, there was ego attributes like socioeconomic level, there was more creativity somehow, or more diversity of methodologies that they were used, and a lot of bridging and bonding kind of framework, which is something that has been replaced by the position generator. This is something interesting because I would like to know what happened in 2010. Something happening there, or maybe just before, because obviously publications have a specific timeline that is different as society. So methodological decisions, almost everything is done from a quantitative perspective, very little, well, qualitative is only one article, which is a shame maybe. In general, actually, almost half of the studies use data from 2011 and 2020, and only 7 studies compare between countries, which is something that maybe is a gap in the literature. And again, the country of the data that was used, again, is the same as the authors. So the authors are publishing from their own countries, which also makes sense, right? So limitations, a lot of people didn't report limitations, which I found weird. It's like, well, you always have limitations. There is no perfect research. But then you have a lot of problems with data collection and access to data, which is something that I'm going to come back later on. So for future research, which is something maybe the most interesting part too, because it can help us with what we can do later on, is that we saw a lot of authors highlighting the fact that we need to diversify population, spaces, cities, countries, or groups. And a lot of people put the emphasis in actually different socio-demographic categories, like gender, race, and socioeconomic level. Those are the ones mentioned, at least. Which is also interesting because it's something that a lot of people say, okay, we have the restriction that we don't have this diversity aspect in our research, but it's not something that we're going to work on. It's like something that we need to improve later on. And longitudinal data collection is something that a lot of people say, which is, this is perfect for us because we did our project in a longitudinal approach and also looking into women with a low socioeconomic level in a country of the South. So for us, it was like, okay, good point. We did it. We are trying to reach a good data. Methodological aspects for future research, there are many. We're a strong methodological community, I think. And we are in need of, again, diversity of methods, different ways of collecting data, develop new instruments. There is a lot of people talking about how the position generator is really good because also allows comparing studies, because a lot of people is using it in different countries. But maybe it's the moment to change those a little bit, or maybe think of new tools that actually could also help to give us more information. It's not, I think there was a consensus in terms of there was, it's not that it's a bad tool, but it's maybe that tool could be complemented with other ones. So I think that's the approach and the conclusions from many people. So something else that I would like to reach some final reflections. So there is a great number of quantitative studies. The name generator is by far the most used tool ever. There are difficulties associated with data collection, especially with the diversified part. There is a lack of problematization of the connection between theory, methodology, and results. There were like, oh, I don't remember that number. I didn't. It was like 3 studies that they were the only ones who actually problematized somehow that aspect in their articles. And there is a lack of more current data and diversity, as I was saying. So this leads us to the question actually, So what is interesting is thinking about the position generator and social capital. It was created as a concept for organizations, right? It was created in that setting. And I think that's important to remember always when we are using this. But it's interesting maybe that we could think about this concept, or maybe that's a challenge for our research later on. We still have a couple of years. of thinking at different ways of actually of expression of social capital. Maybe we need to think in another tools and also another expression than what is happening in reality. And that's why we are actually focusing on women caregivers as and we are asking what are their social capital levels somehow. Yeah, if I can say that in that way. So obviously we have some limitations. What I would like to highlight is actually that obviously we concentrate our whole research in a specific journals. And the second limitation is something that we're working on because it says that we already concentrate ourselves in the English speaking studies, but actually right now we are working on the Spanish speaking studies, and maybe we can compare them what happens in there. So thank you so much. I know I have less than a minute, so thank you so much for your attention, and I'm glad to receive any questions.
So, thank you so much, Francisca. So we got 5 minutes for discussion. Maybe this occasion we can give the opportunity for people who are online. And then, yep. So you have questions right now from
I saw the claps from people like. Yeah, exactly. So.
I can do a question actually, but I cannot raise my hand for some reason.
Go ahead.
Okay, I was wondering, just based on the selection of the journals that you use, I guess there's a rich literature about gender and capital in all the management literature that they will not usually publish, no, in the journals that you mentioned. So I was wondering, to what extent it would be nice to probably include at least some of the top journals, one of these, Academy of Management journal, or organizational science, where, I'm thinking, like where these people usually publish, because I think that would be maybe something to get from there.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Thank you, Jose Luis. Actually, what we're doing right now is that we are moving to other journals who are in Spanish. So, for example, mainly Verdes, because obviously that is the big one in Spanish. But we are looking into do that because we have 4 years project. So first we start with those journals as a priority to create a survey. Then we have these Spanish speakers journals, and what we would like to actually do the following that is actually what you just said. So that is perfect because we are trying to reach those other journals and maybe compare what is happening. So maybe also there is a lot of gender studies journals who actually work with the social capital concept. And I know I agree with you, they have a very different sense of what is social capital, and maybe they even use, they don't use social networks approach. So that is even part of our definition of probably that we are using of social capital. Yes, so of course, just to be in resume, yes, I agree with you.
Right. I agree. I was just thinking because I mean I know that some of the PhDs of Martin Hilduv or Tasseli and these people are actually working on gender, and through this, that's what I was thinking. Probably you might not cover them because they will typically publish in other kind of journals that they will only consider the second best to publish in social networks, or the journals that you included there.
Yeah,
but I understand.
Also on the books. For example, it's like there are many books that actually are talking about this topic, which is something that we would like to reach at some point too. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Jose Luis. I know if there is more questions for Francisca, people online or yeah, please.
Yeah, I was really interested about the exclusions. I mean, I know if you do a systematic review, there's often a lot of exclusions. But was there one very common reason? Was there something that came up a lot to exclude something? I mean, particularly, obviously the network science, you started with 170 something, I can't remember, wasn't excluded nearly every single thing. So I wondered, what was the main reason for exclusion?
I have two. And actually, that's a really good point. Because it was super tricky for us. It takes actually probably longer to decide that part of the research rather than the analysis.
Right.
So in that part, we decided for two main ones. There are little ones, but so the first one, it was the fact that actually a lot of people said social and capital separated. So for some reasons, some journals don't have the system. Sorry, this is not a problem of the journals, I cannot say that.
Right.
No, but the thing is that when we said we want the keyword social capital, sometimes that appears as separated, and obviously we have so many capitals that they were not into the thing that we were interested on.
Yeah. It's a bit like Barry Wellman used to actually say. There was a famous quote from a novel which said, "London is the social capital of Europe."
Okay, yes.
So, yeah, that's right, yeah, precisely.
I think it's fun now. That's a good example. But now I'm going to say Matías said that. So that was one, and the other one, it was the fact that we were only reaching articles in which the main concept was social capital. Because a lot of articles were concluding, saying, oh, maybe it could be interesting to look into the social capital of someone. So then they appear in our search. So for example, that's why we take so much time actually selecting those. But it's very practical reason, because we were super interested also in the methodological approach that they used, because we wanted to create a survey. So we needed that information, which is something that I didn't mention, but a lot of articles, they didn't say what kind of scale they were using, which was a little bit tricky for us. Maybe they were in the appendix sometimes, in the supplementary material, but it was a little bit difficult to work with those articles specifically. Yeah.
And I also wondered, did you count how many different data sets were used? Because a lot of these social capital papers use exactly the same. I mean, you get the Netherlands one, probably from the schools data they've got, because they've collected the right kind of data to actually do that analysis. Where other countries, there's no big survey in the United Kingdom that you'd be able to fall back to do a social capital in that way.
Yeah, for sure. Actually, United States and Netherlands.
They both done a general, more or less, well, obviously United States did the general social survey, so it was in there, so there's a classic question for social capital.
Exactly.
The Netherlands data, they collected data specifically to do a social capital project, and it was a big data set,
So actually that project, I don't know, if they were like 25 articles from the Netherlands, probably 20 were from that project. So definitely actually I was thinking of doing the network of these collaborations as an extra step. We didn't do it for actually the article, but I was interested in looking into that specifically, because I think the same happened to United States. There were some specific places in which you can see, for example, the Berkeley community, California, and then another place that appears a lot, it was the University of Florida with McCarthy. So you can get it was like, okay, there are 10 articles who are using the same kind of data. Here there are another 15 articles. So that also means that the diversity of methodology was not at all, because it was the same one. I think.
I have a follow-up question then. So if you look at the data, let's say you're using the GSS survey or the Netherlands survey, do you think there are internal differences on the way they are understanding social capital? Let's say they are all using the same, or they have different theory of the same method. You know what I mean?
That's why I was so angry that actually I couldn't see the survey in all the cases. But because I couldn't know exactly what questions they were using. Sometimes they mentioned the first question, but they didn't mention all the ones that they were using. So that was a little bit tricky. But actually, that's one of my hypotheses, that that's why we also are using different generators to understand social capital, because we would like to make that step right now to actually compare these, because we already have the data from one survey. So we want to compare them, and then we want to compare them with what is happening in the other ones. But I cannot answer more specifically about that part, because I haven't looked into those. I know I have a folder in my computer saying here are all the surveys that they are using, but I'm not sure about the details.
Great. So thanks so much,
Thank you for
Francisca. We are really looking forward to the next step of your project, maybe in Paris and Saldo. Great. So next presentations is from José Luis Estévez. José Luis Estévez is gonna present about gender bias in medieval inquisitions and its place in shaping the knowledge about the heterodox. So
Can you see me? I'm using my phone here so you can have my image as well, but that's the less important thing. You can hear me well.
we can see you, yeah.
We can hear.
Okay.
And we can yeah.
And that's the thing. Well, first of all, thanks for accepting my presentation. This is probably be the most sui generis presentation in this session. But yeah, indeed, it's a gender paper, but with a very historical rationale. No? Well, my name is José Luis Estévez. I'm at the Department of Economic and Social History at the University of Helsinki. And well, let's get into the debate. So what we are addressing here is a historical, actually, debate. You know, many historians has been discussing about the experiences and the roles that men, but especially women, who actually experience in these medieval heretical movements. You know, many of you might be asking, what are those? No. So for the layperson, some of them are relatively well known, like for example, cátaros in Spanish. If you happen to come from Buenos Aires or Montevideo, maybe you know also Valdenses, because there's a big community there. But many others are pretty unknown, no, for the general public. No, Guglielmite, Lollards, no. All these movements, basically, they will emerge in different parts of Europe during the high and late Middle Ages, at least the part of Europe that was not, of course, under Islam at the time. And from the historical point of view, what gives them some unity is the fact that, well, that they oppose, no, the Christian Orthodoxy, but there are also suspicions about to what extent they could, basically offer opportunities for some broader societal change, especially with relation to gender. So in fact, this is the big historical debate, is to what extent these movements provide women the spaces for liberation, no, of the Orthodox hierarchies. And historians disagree. You know? There are those who they basically say that these movements, they were offering this, and they usually back their claims on the fact that the proportion of women in these movements is very high. So that probably entails that they were appealing to them. Also, sometimes they highlight the fact that they appear in as part of the elite. So they are priests, they are preachers, no, like women performing as preachers. But then, of course, there are also like the other historians that they would say, wow, this is very selective evidence. If we look at the proportions, no, 50-50 doesn't say much. And then also many of these movements, they observe a very strong scriptural fundamentalism. So they suspect that if anything, no, this movement could even reinforce, no, like the patriarchal asymmetries. And well, and then we have this another layer of complexity, which is the sources about from where we know about these people, no? And the fact is that almost everything that we know about these movements come from what the Inquisitor left, not from what these people told themselves. So this means that they're a source of bias here. And no serious historian will tell you that, of course, that the Inquisitor basically captured reality as it was. But the point is to what extent, no, when they were doing this job of investigating these communities, they influenced, no, the proportion of men and women, or to what extent they biased the material, no, and in which way. So that's what we actually try to address with this paper and our tools, no. So what we argue is, well, before looking at the contents and trying to interpret it, we need to understand well how the inquisitorial practice actually could affect, no, the results that is eventually the trials that are being used for informing, no, our knowledge of these communities. And well, theoretically speaking, we use just three main concepts, very, very broad. One of them is this idea of census production, which is common in historical sociology. And it's this idea that none of these documents we can understand them as a pure reflection of reality. And in this case, there are two clear agencies producing them. On the one hand, we have the Inquisitor, their tools and methods to extract information. And then on the other hand, we have also the agency of the people who at least partly cooperating by basically providing testimonies, giving information. So it's the interplay of these two that is captured, no, in these records. And then if we go a bit more into the specificities of the procedure, Here I use a term which is called tie appropriation. This was used by Spencer Hedworth. He's a criminologist, I believe, in the US. And it's this idea that outsiders can actually access incriminating information of a community by using the social ties of those individuals. And that's exactly how inquisitors proceeded in practice. So they will essentially bring someone before them, they will interrogate them, they will learn about their their whereabouts and who were with them. And then from there, they will gather information about more possible suspicious people that are potentially callable to appear before him. And this idea of discretion is very important because actually inquisitors, they were granted a huge discretion to choose. I mean, this is not that important for us, but the idea is, I think in the 12th century, they changed the legal procedure. It's called ex officio, which means inquisitors didn't need a formal plaintiff to pursue someone. So they could do it by themselves. So that means they have full discretion to choose whom to bring before them. And the idea was that they could, of course, that they could exhaustively map these people, eventually eliminate them. But of course, that doesn't mean that they could not introduce biases, in the way they brought individuals, and concretely, gender biases. So actually, that's what we try to do empirically, with this paper, So I hope this is more or less clear. This is the theory part, and now moving into which is the data that we use and what exactly is that we did with this data. So it's a case study. I'm not studying, like many cases. This is one in particular. It's a trial of the Valdensians in Javeno. It's a small village in northern Italy in 1335. This is a case that we chose for several reasons. Now, of course, we worked with it before. We published even with it before. That's why we know it very well. But on the other hand, it happens to be extremely well preserved, which is the exception in this type of materials. Plenty of lacuna, usually appears in inquisitorial trials. And then the other important thing is that this is a rural population. It's very flat. We don't have a lot of heterogeneity in terms of status. We don't have peasants and nobility. Here, everything is poor because these people were actually practicing poverty on purpose. It was like their idea. So that was important because the inquisitor didn't introduce bias because he was pursuing some people for more economic gains, for example. And then in addition to that, I'm here on for a couple of details, okay, this is a more or less a month trial, which is a norm. These trials usually are very quick. It involved around 270 people, 110 individuals, local residents, they provided their testimony here. And there were 90 instances of summonses. And summons, I'm not sure if this speaks to you, essentially it's like being subpoenaed. It's officially being called to appear before the inquisitor. That's what it means. Here you have a bit of the descriptives of the network. I have depicted the accusations as a network. So you can see here the 700 and almost 50 ties, which is the accusation from one person to another. It's hard to see in this plot any gender pattern, except for perhaps this kind of preferential attachment. But if you look at the right-hand side, the figure number 2, you can see already that in the timing of the events, if the timing of the testimonies and also of the summonses, they start to emerge a gender pattern, with women, which are in light gray, appearing mostly at the end of the process, whereas men appear mostly in the middle part. And the early part is a bit empty because usually inquisitions, they offer this kind of period of grace for people to appear voluntarily. That's why there are no summonses during the first week. So then we started to explore the data. And the first question was to what extent these accusations had a larger or minor impact in the trial. So we compared actually men and women in terms of how many people they accused, whether there were differences. And if you see there in panel A, actually there are no differences between men and women in the number of people that they accuse on average. We have one extreme outlier, this Johannes Gauteri, who happened to be put under torture. That's why he provided more than 60 names. But on average, differences are not that big, between genders. And also when we check a little bit the Jules-Q AI index, to see whether there are homophily there, you see that men are a bit more homophilous and women a bit heterophilous, which is telling us that essentially both genders were mostly accusing or male, or men in this case. So that was essentially descriptive, but doesn't tell us whether these ties actually, or this accusation, play a larger or minor impact on the full trial. And for that, what we did is a very simple counterfactual approach. So what we did is we took the full network, we took the 34 women who provided the position, and we removed their ties, the outgoing ties, not the accusations. And then we measure for each and every of the other deponents the reachability. You know, how many people would eventually be involved? Remember, this is tie appropriation, no? So the inquisitor was basically snowballing. And the distribution is what you see there. It's the dark gray distribution, which you see is by model, of course, because some people were never gave a name, or essentially the inquisitor completely ignored them. But on average, you see that this is somewhere around 173 names, you know, that would be incriminated, you know, if we rule out women, you know, from the process, you know, in this counterfactual way. And then we compare it with males. So we did the same. We took samples of 34 males, so in this case, the same number of women, and we performed the same process. You know? Then we compile the data and we compare how it looks. And if you see the distribution in light gray is capturing the effect of removing 34 men. And you see that that's, on average, there are like 60 names fewer, you know, when we exclude 34 men and when we exclude 34 women, which is hinting that these effects were, the impact of the denunciation was probably smaller, you know, for women. We repeated doing some matching before, and you see it converge a bit. So matching is that we select only males that actually resemble men, that resemble the women who depose. And the effect is still there. It's not that extreme, but still you can see that the two distributions do not overlap sufficiently. And then this is the most networky part of the analysis. And then we move into the more like into the temporality. Remember that we saw this very clear pattern already in the descriptives. So what we try to answer is, how long did it take for the inquisitor to bring someone before them after they learn about their implication? So essentially it's the time elapsed, no? Since I learn about you that you are incriminated until I call you to appear before me. And what you see on the graphs basically is the timing of those summonses. No, it's the survival, if you want. So they all start at the 100, and then you can see that the lines drop, no, depending on the timing and when they appear. And you see that it seems to be a gender difference in both cases. I haven't told you that the difference, by the way, between panel A and B is the unit of time. So in panel A, we have calendar dates, is as basically it happens in reality, whereas in the second panel is the time elapsed for someone since their name appear in someone's testimony until their deposition. And that's why, their summons, sorry. That's why the two lines differ, but the gender effect seems to be still there, you know, with this gap in between the two lines. So finally, we analyze this data. We started using what's called Cox regression models. We realized that the gender effect in this is not time fixed. So the plot that I'm showing you there, it indicates whether this gender difference remains over time. And the one line indicates that the odds are the same for both gender. And you see that the line is below it, not this one that is zigzagging a little bit. But over time, it starts to converge, you know, towards one. So it seems that there's a gender effect, but that over time, it disappears. No, after a couple of weeks, no, if anything, it seems that both genders are called with equal probabilities. And then in addition to this, we have to control for a bunch of possible, situations that could implicate the reasons why someone was summoned. No? We have, of course, the number of denunciations that they have received. They have whether some family was accused or not. So this is the network effect, where they might have been actually summoned just because, well, they was suspect by association. Then we have acquaintances with one of the key figures, and eventually we have this dimension, which is whether they hosted a congregation in their house. So imagine, from the point of view of inquisitor, this is a major felony, no, to be holding a mass, you know, in your own house. And these are the results. So I'm showing you here 4 models, which some of them, they include all these dimensions, and then we have different control for the random terms. So basically we are nesting by person or by day. Irrespective of this, you can see that the gender effect, which is the one that we show on top, is always positive there, non-significant, which in this context, using these accelerated failure time models means that they have higher chances of surviving being summoned, which in this case, they were less likely to be called to appear before the inquisitor. And if you compare the other effects, most of them are negative, no, because they are somehow they are shortening your life, no, they are making you more likely to be called. So overall, the finding was that in this, there was some sort of like gender bias, in how the inquisitor proceeded, in practice in this particular trial. So the summary of the summary of the results are this. So when we look at the accusations, we found that even though men and women, they don't differ in the number of denunciations they reported on average, it seems that the impact that the accusations of men had in the trial were larger. And then when we look at the summonses, we saw that it seems that the inquisitor was more aggressively looking into men. And this holds even when we control for the disaggravating circumstances that we control for. So this is my last slide, and here is just a bit of the summary of what we learn about this. What does it mean? What is involved for the, well, first of all, what we are trying to recall these historians that they are working with this material, that even if legally there were no differences between men and women, there were prevailing attitudes, that probably the inquisitor were embodying, and this could reinforce the gender asymmetries. In this case, we see that there is a gender effect in practice, even if in legally it wasn't. Then we also show, this is perhaps more for sociologists, usually when we look at this religious persecution, people highlight the role that women and vulnerable minorities, they played as scapegoats. What we show here is that doesn't hold for this case. Maybe, it will happen later in time with the witch trials, but not at least in this context still. And then the other last point is, usually historians, they also reflect about how these movements, they change institutionally over time. So they will say Valdensians in the 12th century, they were very, symmetrical in terms of gender, but then they start to specialize over time. And they attribute it to their ideological developments. It's like, oh, that's how they understood the Bible. What we're saying here is, well, let's not forget that they were persecuted, and probably maybe in a gender way, and that could also explain that in this adaptation, they adopted some roles. And finally, it's just my last comment is the methodological part. One of the big, basically, debates about the Inquisition is whether it was politically motivated or religiously motivated. And what we are saying is, if we have those proxies, about, for example, the status of people, we can perform similar analysis to try to disentangle, the political and the religious component, of these persecutions. So I'm going to leave you there. This is a painting many of you might recognize. That was actually an Inquisition in the 19th century in Spain, a painting by Goya. So I hope that this presentation at least brings some thought to you, and looking forward to hear any comments, suggestions that you might have. Thank you.
Thank you, José Luis. So we got 5 minutes of questions. And if you Francisca, please.
Oh, José, the camera of José Luis is up. He's using two.
Two devices. Yeah.
Nice to see you, José Luis. So the thing is, I was wondering if you have any information about the reasons of the accusations, because I found interesting that sometimes I have seen, well, I like the literature about the history of witches. That is something weird, but the thing is that I found super interesting that for the witches, the men who were accused because they were linked to other women who were accused. So I was thinking maybe there is somehow a way to actually to control that, or maybe look into that. I have no idea if you have the data or not about the reasons, and if they were linked between each other. Thank you. Oh, we cannot hear you.
Oh, you're muted, José Luis, sorry.
But the other José Luis is.
José Luis, you're muted.
Yeah, we cannot hear you. Maybe you can unmute your cell phone?
No.
That's
That's
cool.
okay.
Let me see. Can you try again?
It's connected.
Yeah, but he has to.
Yeah, I'm currently, I muted myself and I'm muted. Can you hear me?
Now we can hear you.
Okay, I removed the other camera because maybe that's problematic. Yeah, I mean, the drivers of, I mean, we cannot really, we cannot know, no, and of course, this is something that people might reflect, because they will say some people accuse others because of, bad blood, whatever. In this case, we will never know. I mean, of course, why people exactly denounce, but the feeling when you see that perhaps, except for the couple of people who deposed the first days, still during the voluntary period, most of these accusations were basically given because they were under threat of them being, penalized or because eventually you are under oath. So you will commit, how's the name? Well, eventually, if you are caught lying, so that means that they will increase your penalty. So they will do it mostly because they were protecting themselves. That doesn't mean, of course, that they will give all the people that they knew of They will give probably a sample of them, no, and they try to protect each other's. But when we try to talk about the drivers, no, that's always, you know, like speculation, because we really cannot tell for sure, no, why people did it in the first place. But my feeling is because they wanted to protect themselves, because they considered, no, at this point, appearing before the Inquisitor was the best thing they could do, no, given that they have seen other people appearing before them, that they probably know that the Inquisitor has already learned about them. So, you know, better I come forward, no, before he learns from me, no, from someone else. That's my feeling, no, for most of the opponents, the people who depose. No?
Thank you.
So, any other questions, people online or here in presence? We don't have questions, so I think we're done. Thanks so much, Jose Luis, again for your presentation.
Well, thanks to you for having me, of course. No?
So I think we can just go forward with the next presentation. Yeah, so next presentation is from Aditi.
Yeah.
Aditi is going to present us about yes, a second. Beyond family, how support networks shape urban women's work participation. So, yeah, we can see your PowerPoint on our screen. Can you hear us, Aditi?
Yes. Hi, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. So I'll be talking about this paper titled Beyond Family, How Support Networks Shape Urban Women's Work Participation. So we know that it takes a village to raise a child. Women's labor force participation is shaped not only by their personal choices or their economic conditions, but also by the availability, strength, and quality of the support systems in their environment. These support systems could be family networks, community-based resources, childcare services, and workplace policies. So support from spouses, extended family members, and the broader community can significantly ease the dual burden of paid and unpaid labor on women. In particular, young mothers often face unique challenges due to this intensive demands of caregiving and recent transition to parenthood, as well as societal expectations around motherhood. So there are multiple studies who have looked at family structure and work. Freedy, Musida, and Patimos highlight that traditional family structures can sometimes reinforce conservative norms, thereby limiting women's labor market opportunities. And India's traditional family structures are also evolving. Pashman, Soley, and Classens note that urbanization and the rise of nuclear families have reduced reliance on kin or family for caregiving. This has led to a growing dependence on external support systems such as domestic workers and childcare services. However, the mere availability of these services do not always guarantee a meaningful support. So the quality of support matters very much, as other papers have also emphasized that the involvement of family members like mothers-in-law can significantly improve women's labor force participation. Support networks can, be both enabling as well as constraining. So when husbands and in-laws actively help out in caregiving and housework, women have more freedom to engage in paid work. And conversely, households where caregiving duties fall entirely on women or where family dynamics create stress for women, in such settings, it can significantly hinder women's workforce participation. So the central question of this study is, do support networks affect women's participation in paid work? So we hypothesize that women with stronger support networks are more likely to engage in the workforce. So previous research has largely equated support networks with family members or the size of the household, limiting the understanding of how these networks function. Additionally, even when support systems are available, their presence does not mean that the women actually receive support from these people. We argue that in the Indian context, both kin and non-kin support play an important role in women's participation in the labor force. So to better understand this dynamic, we break support into multiple components like density, source, type, and intensity of support to analyze not just the availability, but also the quality and effect of these networks on women's labor force participation. So the first component is density, which refers to the number of support networks available for assistance with childcare and domestic work, as shown in the figure. So respondents with lower support density, say up to 4 support systems, which could be family members, community members, and even online resources such as grocery delivery and online shopping. So in the urban setting, the outsourcing of household tasks through digital platforms like apps has become increasingly important source of support for women, especially in the urban India context. On the other hand, a denser support network is where 5 or more support systems are available, providing a broader safety net. So the threshold of 4 or 5 is very is restricted to this study, and I'm not talking about in general. The second component is the source of support, that is from whom the respondent is actually receiving support. Is it the kin, like parents, parents-in-law, other relatives, or non-kin or external support like neighbors, childcare institutions? So in addition, we also see what is the type of support that women receive. Is it support received in housework, childcare, both, and how that affects their workforce participation? And the last component is the intensity of support, which reflects how frequently and extensively the support is provided. So lower intensity support could be help received in, say, 1 or 2 activities, such as only laundry or laundry and cooking, and that is represented by a thinner line. In contrast, higher density support is characterized by assistance in multiple activities, such as could be cooking and cleaning and laundry and shopping. So, help in multiple 4 to 5 activities. And that is depicted by a thicker line in the figure, which means more frequent or more intense support. So for this study, the data was collected from young mothers aged 25 to 35 with at least one child aged 5 or below across all the districts of New Delhi and the National Capital Region. So we chose this age group for children because if 5 or below is the time where children need active childcare support, and that is the most important time. And then these interviews, so we conducted surveys from 193 women, followed by qualitative data from 30 young mothers through in-depth interviews. We interviewed both homemakers as well as employed women. Talking about results, let's first look at the work trajectories of young mothers over 2 monumental phases of their lives, which is first is after marriage and then after childbirth. So of the 136 women who were employed before marriage, 22 women exited after marriage and 26 exited after childbirth. Thus, the employment rate drops from 70% before marriage to 50% after childbirth. So there is a difference of 20 percentage points. And to give a background about who are these currently working or employed women, so we see that about 65% of the women who are currently working are living in a joint family setting compared to only 38% living in a nuclear family setting. 70% of these currently working women use the services of a domestic worker, that is external support, and about 62% women have access to a childcare or have a childcare provision near their home. So here we use a network graph to display the types and sources of support employed mothers and homemakers receive from family members and the community. So the thickness of the links indicates the frequency, while the nodes indicate the intensity of support. So some patterns are quite evident. So on the left side, we have homemakers, and on the right side, we have employed women. So employed women receive much more substantial support from their husbands, mothers-in-law, community members, including domestic workers and workplace. On the other hand, homemakers are relying mostly on external help, suggesting that they mostly bear the household and caregiving responsibilities on their own. So it's either husband or domestic worker. We then used a multivariate logistic regression to see the effect of socio-demographic and support factors on the work status of young mothers. We found that women with higher support density are almost 4 times more likely to participate in the labor force. Particularly, support received for childcare is very important in defining women's work status. So, women who are receiving childcare support also have 4 times higher odds of being employed. And we also find that women receiving high intensity housework support, yeah, so women receiving intensity housework support from domestic workers and high intensity childcare support from mothers-in-law have a significantly greater likelihood of being employed. So when particularly asked how support networks influence their workforce participation, we found some positive aspects and negative aspects. So for the positive influence, this 32-year-old employed woman with 2 children, she says that my mother-in-law is a lifesaver. She takes care of the house, cooks breakfast, and waits for us to come home to cook dinner. She also manages the kids. Without her, I don't think I could have continued working. And in a similar way, a 30-year-old employed woman with 2 children says that I feel that family can take the best care of the child because small children cannot explain what's happening with them. So I can continue my job because my father-in-law takes care of the children in my absence. And knowing that my children are safe and cared for gives me the peace of mind to focus on my work. On the other hand, talking about barriers created by lack of support networks is first at the family level. So, what are the barriers that women face at the family level? So, this homemaker with 1 child says that I have to tell my husband to do chores, but if I ask him to do something, it'll be done. He gives us 100%. But why can't he take the initiative without me asking every time? He just comes home, eats, and sleeps. He has no idea about housework unless I remind him. It is exhausting, and I do most of the housework and childcare, which makes it hard to even think about a full-time job. And not only at a family level, we also see barriers created at a community level. For example, the extreme lack of trust in daycare and external childcare options. For example, this homemaker says that I don't trust daycares. I feel that they just placate the parents by showing their best behavior when the parents are around. But as soon as the parents leave, they don't give as much priority to the children. And another woman says that I'm very apprehensive about leaving my baby in the daycare because of all the stories that we have heard in the media, it's hard to feel safe. So I rely on my in-laws and I don't feel comfortable with the idea of daycare. So basically in this study, we hypothesized that the support systems of employed mothers are better than those of stay-at-home mothers. We find that support density is a significant factor, with women with higher support density being almost 4 times more likely to participate in labor force. And the results are consistent with our research hypothesis, showing that employed women or employed mothers have better support systems in terms of both density and intensity. However, it is important to reflect that mention that the findings also reflect that gendered expectations persist because most of the um, support responsibilities are forced on other women, such as mothers-in-law who are taking care of the children. And our key findings underscore that the role of family and community support networks, revealing that the joint family structures and spousal involvement, in addition to reliable childcare, are essential enablers for employment of women. And at the end, to talk a bit about policy implications, given the important role of the help received in childcare and its effect on women's work, policymakers must invest in affordable, high-quality childcare services. And not only a childcare institution, flexible workplace policies such as remote work from home options or childcare facilities at the workplace are important, which can prevent career disruptions and can help new mothers re-entering the labor force. And priorities should also be on the quality and transparency of childcare services because respondents cited high daycare costs as well as extremely low trust in these facilities because of concerns over safety and supervision. So respondents say that camera access, allowing real-time monitoring of their children is essential for mothers to even consider using daycare services. And the last is the limitations and challenges of the study include an extremely high rate of non-response from women, and the sensitivity of the topic also introduced some non-response. Due to this, we interviewed every young mother who agreed to be a part, and that could have introduced some potential bias in the study. Thank you.
So much, I, for your presentation was quite nice. Now if we got questions here in person, people from here or people online. I get just one question for you. What kind of, for example, because you talk about public policy initiatives to, to support women with in order, to foster her participation in the labor markets. But yeah, one of the things that I'm really worried about most of this kind of initiatives like childcare services are still gendered. So, I mean, I'm still wondering about how, how states and governments and policymakers can also, promote to gender equity in terms of childcare services. What do you think about from that perspective? This is my question, and thanks again. Yeah.
Thank you for the question. So it is a known fact that women do dominate the paid care force market, and it is extremely difficult to address that gender bias unless we address it inside the house. So I think both go hand in hand. Of course, we've seen an improvement over the years. It's getting better, but the problem that we generally face is during the paid care force is that people think that at least the women are employed, so it doesn't matter if it's the care force or not, which is a problem because care force is known to be extremely unpaid and underpaid compared to other fields. So gender bias do persist. I'm not sure how we could address it, but it's very important to address this this gender bias because then this is a vicious cycle. We see paid care force being dominated by women, and again it comes back home. Women are expected to do it at home, and then it goes back out. So it's a very vicious circle, which honestly I'm not sure how to propose a solution to.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, thank you. That's all right.
Yeah, how relevant is the socioeconomic status of the women involved here? What way did you control for that, or did you see that as a major issue?
Okay, thank you for the question. So in this study, we focused on middle class women particularly because I'm not sure if you're aware or not, but in the Indian scenario, the women's labor force participation follows a U-shaped curve. So the women who have the lowest education as well as wealth quintile, and the women with the highest education and highest wealth quintile have high labor force participation, but women in the middle have the lowest labor force participation. So the reason why we chose to stick our study to middle class women is we wanted to see why the women who have decent education, at least graduation, and have access to resources like domestic workers or childcare services, why women with access to resources are choosing not to work, which is why this is a homogeneous group in the sense of wealth, similar wealth quintile.
Thank you. Francisca, please.
Okay, I'm going to be quick just to not keep you away from the coffee break. So thank you so much, Aditi, for your research. And I also know that for you, maybe it's the afternoon because you are like in the late of the day, probably. Yeah, I don't know. But so I was wondering about if when you're measuring support networks, Are you considering different dimensions of support, or what is the type of questions that you are using to measure that? If you can maybe extend a little bit on that. Thank you.
Again, thank you for the question. So to measure support, I actually had a table where I went to each respondent and I asked, say, for example, this particular housework, say cooking, who all in the family does cooking? And then who all in the family does cleaning? So I had a list of multiple activities, about 22, 23, and a list of all the household members, and I was asking who does what. So in that sense, I could see um, who all participated in which activity and how frequently.
That is cool data. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation idea, and thank you for all of you to participate in this session of caregiving and gender. So we can just move to the coffee break, or maybe if you are online, you can just prepare yourself your coffee. Thank you, yeah.
But thanks everybody and have a nice conference.
Thank you, José Luis. Hope to see you
Thank you
later
so
in
much.
the other sessions.
Yeah, well, that's
Thank
true.
you.
That's true. Yeah, yeah. I mean, sorry, it's a bit late here. I'm 5 hours.
Yeah,
ahead.
Thank you. Oh, yeah.